Good evening. It's good to be back with everybody. And if you would, here in just a second, if you would bow with me in prayer. I'll wait for people to sit down here first, though. Lord God, we thank you. We praise you for all of your blessings, especially the blessing of brothers and sisters in the church, brothers and sisters who have a common faith and look to the cross and the resurrection, and look to that day when there will be a new heaven and new earth where we won't be encumbered anymore with the frailties of life, the problems we have with our bodies and the problems we have with our minds and with one another, but there'll be a time of peace where there's no hunger, pain, or thirst, no tears. We look forward to that day that we can sit at the banquet table with you and in a face-to-face sort of a way. But help us never to forget, Father, that really we sit at that banquet table with you and those that have gone on before us every time we come together, and especially when we come together for the Lord's Supper, for communion. Father, we thank you that we can have people around us, connected to us, who care for us, people who can accept the fact that each of us have frailties, each of us are broken people, broken sometimes in different ways, but all of us are broken. None of us could stand before you and say that we have been good, totally good. But we know that you make us that through the cross, through the blood of Jesus, that you see us as holy because of him, not because of us. Father, we pray that for each of us as your children here, that we can take the blessings that you've given to us, the comfort that you've given to us, and that we can share this with others, that we can be a comfort to others. Father, help us that in each of us in our own way, that we can truly be wounded healers, that we can, even through our own wounds, through our own sins, through our own frailties, or whatever the cross is that each of us has to bear, I pray that you'll help each of us to reach out to others. And as we recognize our own wounds, that we're able to help others as they struggle with their wounds as well. Father, help us to recognize this and for each of us, again, to learn each day more and more how that we can be wounded healers and wounded helpers to others. Father, I pray for your blessings on our class tonight, and we ask this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Well, I think we have, after tonight, one more session with me, and then y'all will be on to something else. And so I pray God's blessings with you with that. But as we remember where we are today with this, remember your formula that I've repeated every time, and that we remember that A produces B, B produces C, C produces D, and D produces E, that this is some event or circumstance that produces a cognition with us, a thought, a belief, an interpretation of that event. And if we want to change feelings which come from those thoughts, then if we change the way that we look at things, the way we think about something, then the feeling will follow eventually. And then that feeling or that affect, those emotions will produce, one way or another, behaviors. And we want to have a repertoire of healthy, good, godly behaviors that will match each of these emotions that are produced there. This seems to be the way that God made the soul work. And so there will be consequences or results from whatever our behavior is. And I've added some things, if you've noticed here, a couple of little blocks of some things that we talked about way back when we were talking about Philippians chapter 4, and we particularly honed in on verse 6 and verse 8. And in verse 8, the word logizomai, that we get logic from, but the word means to think about such things. And we're going to be thinking about healthy, good, godly, healthy, noble, holy things. And that is going to help us with our feelings and our emotions and our behavior. So that is that word logizomai. And it's one to remember as you go back. All of this whole formula is, I believe, included in what Paul is talking about. Remember, Paul was not trying to teach us cognitive behavioral therapy, but cognitive behavioral therapy fits very well with a lot of what is going on in what Paul is saying. So we call this, as we change our thinking, as we look at our thinking, as we backtrack and say we have a feeling, we identify the feeling, we then backtrack and say, what was I thinking about just before I started feeling happy, sad, mad, whatever, and we nail it, and we think about that thinking. We ask ourselves, what was I thinking? And then, was that thinking healthy thinking? Was that true thinking? Was it distorted or skewed in some way? And if it was, then what we can do is we change that, we modify that. And I know that this is what we're doing in here. This is like a crash course. I don't expect you to to have all of this right there, but it's something you practice. And if you will practice this, it'll work and it will help you in many ways. What we're going over here is not a panacea for everything. You'll still have problems. There'll still be things that will come up, but this will help you tremendously. And this is something that, again, is very has a very foundational basis, I believe, in Scripture. So we change that thinking, we'll change the feelings. And then we will also ask, even if we have a negative feeling, which may be coming from a healthy negative feeling, we're going to ask, well, how do I express this? How do I get it out? How do I have this behavior in a healthy, holy, godly way? We do not want to repress it, not for long. You might have to do that temporarily to get through some situation, but you want to get back with it, because if you repress it, it will eventually pop out. And if enough of that is going on, it will explode out. And you may not know what that is causing it if it's 20 years later. And you spew off and you get mad or yell at your spouse or do something even worse. And you're thinking, where'd that come from? Well, it might be something that you had impacted way back a long time ago that is now just coming to the surface. We call this, when we're changing our thinking, cognitive restructuring. That's all it means, is changing your thinking or restructuring the way that you think. And that's what Paul, I believe, is talking about in Philippians 4:8 and 4:6 as well. Another way of looking at this, if you recall, is therapeutic metacognition. Don't you love these words that we can come up with? But this just basically means thinking about your thinking. And so remember this. I'll mention it next time as well. And this will help you. Again, this is how the soul works, how God has apparently made things to work, at least to a large degree. And it will be helpful to us if we keep this in mind. The hardest thing for a lot of people to understand and to work through with this is to be able to separate thought from feeling, because it's, as we talked about from the very first session, thoughts, feelings, all of this is so, human beings are so intricately interwoven. Everything affects every other part. But to be able to say, okay, I have a feeling. Here's my feeling is thus and so. Feelings and thoughts are not necessarily true. They might be, but they might not be. So just because you feel something or think something does not make it right. It makes it right that that's how you think or feel, but doesn't mean that that's really true or right. So thinking about your thinking becomes important. And to be able to separate that and say, okay, here's the thought that I was having, the belief, the interpretation of events that is producing this feeling. And to be able to look at that, to tease that apart is very, very difficult for many people. I see this a lot of times because I'll say, well, okay, what are your thoughts about this? And people will say, well, I feel sad, or what. I said, I didn't ask how you feel. That's important. What you feel is important. That's the energy you get to do things with. And sometimes that's the only monitor you have to let you know something about what you're thinking. But, so, I didn't ask what you're feeling. I do want to know what you're feeling. That's important. But what was the thought behind that feeling? What produced that? What generated that? That's the important thing that I'm wanting, at least at that stage. But please hear this. Your feelings are important. And I say this because there are many preachers in our churches, as well as many other denominational churches, that I've heard people say you have to get rid of your feelings. They are not important. And whole sermons on things like this. And I want to say I believe that they're going contrary to what God tells us about us and about Him when they say that. God has feelings also. God has thoughts, of course. And it runs the whole gamut of that feeling wheel that I put up here before. So tonight, last time we were talking about relationships, and we didn't finish on two things, and those were some of out of some of the books like that Gary Chapman here wrote. One is the 5 Love Languages, and I've noted here also on the next slide, I think it is, the Yurkoviches, who have a book very similar, and I think better than his. But a lot of people are familiar with the 5 Love Languages. This, I think, can be very helpful in your marriage and family, not just with marriage and family, but with any relationships. And I'm just going to kind of really briefly go over these very quickly. Many of you have read the book. The Yurkoviches' book, though, are I think better in the sense that they have they've put in the back of each chapter some exercises that are really good for helping you determine your love language, although they don't call it that in their book. But as you, how many of you have read 5 Love Languages? I'm not focusing a lot on this. We're going fast on this because I know your next quarter, I think, is going to be on marriage and family or something, and so I know you'll cover something there. But wherever it comes from, the way we grew up, might be genetic, I don't know, but it might be the way you grew up environmentally, your family you grew up in. All of us learned or came about that we have a language that we speak and we understand that says, I love you, I care about you. But it may be different for each one of us. And it's very likely you married somebody who has a different language. Now, I lived and worked in 80 countries, all 7 continents with multiple cultures. There's no way I could learn every language, but I knew when I went somewhere, one of the first things I was going to do if I was spending any time there is I want to learn their language. I want to learn their culture. Because it is incumbent upon me, if I'm wanting to communicate to them, for me to do it in a way that they understand, that makes it relevant to them. I can't expect that they're all going to speak English, and even at that, American English. You know, they could speak British English, Irish English, they could speak South African or Australian or New Zealand English, some variations in all of those. But so what I wanted to do is to learn their language so that I could, when I say something, they can understand it. So words of affirmation is one. For many of us, all we have to do is if somebody says, you know, hey, you're great, I really appreciate that, you did a great job, whatever, you know, that says I love you. You know, we're affirmed. And a lot of people are like this. And there's nothing wrong with any of these love languages. It's just different. But if you want to express to your wife or your husband, and they are a words of affirmation person, if you try to to communicate your love to them by giving them some gifts or quality time or touch, they don't hear it. They think the quality time, the gifts, yeah, they're nice. But they don't hear what you're really wanting to say is, I love you, I care about you. And so what we want to do is we want to, when we identify that with someone, be sure that we give compliments, give them often, talk to them about, how you think that they've done well, I love you. Other people are acts of service. They like you to do something for them or do something nice. It could be that, say, one of you is the one that usually makes up the bed, but, you beat them to the punch one day. You make it up before they get to it. And so an act of service for them, something that to them is going to communicate, I love you. So words of affirmation won't do it. They're nice, but they don't have the bang, the punch that the other does. Gifts, you let them know you appreciate them and who they are in your life by giving them gifts. Could be bring some flowers home to your wife if she likes flowers. Not all women do. I didn't know that, but some women don't like flowers. But something that they like, giving them a gift, and that says I love you. They're not going to hear it if it's just words of affirmation or acts of service, or at least they're not going to hear it with the punch that you want them to hear it. Quality time. This is a big one. And probably all of us could stand to spend more time with one another or with our kids as well. But quality time. Some people just do not hear the I love you unless, hey, we're spending some time with each other. And quality time does not necessarily mean length of time, duration. It could, but it also could mean a shorter time, but something where you've done something meaningful for one another or with one another. Sometimes just doing something together. It's the togetherness that you like. I've heard it many times where people will say, well, sometimes we don't even have to be in the same room, but I know that we're in the same house together, and that just makes me feel good, So I wouldn't try that all the time, but I would encourage you, have that quality time with your spouse, with your children, and it could be even with friends. Remember that relationships have to be nurtured. They have to be fed. They have to be fertilized. They don't just happen. So the other one is physical touch. And it could be sexual, but this is non-sexual also, mainly, as just some people, they don't hear the I love you unless there's physical touch. And I think women have this as much as men do. A lot of times I hear this thing, well, we all know men always like touch certain types and that kind of thing. Well, I think, there are just as many women probably out there. I don't know how you'd ever have a sample of that really, but women also like physical touch, hugs. You've probably heard it said a number of times. There's actually been some research on this, that I think the number is about 10 hugs per day. And if you can hug for longer than a minute, that would, and even with a kiss as well, holding that for about 30 seconds, or more. So things like this, physical touch, we all need it. And there's nothing wrong with needing these things. A lot of times I find people, they're like, oh, I'm so ashamed I need this, or I've been put down or belittled or whatever because I have these needs. No, these are human needs. And this is just nurturing the soul, nurturing the person, nurturing the connection that God made us to have. And we do that even in church. So these work even with all of us in here. And I think Elisha, when he's preaching, he has to take this into consideration, that there are different people that are kind of having different needs here, that they're going to have a different perspective on what he's saying, or whoever's teaching. there. It's hitting us, different people here in different ways. So those are 5 love languages that Chapman has. I'm not going to go into the Yurkovich's, all of theirs. They have a much more detailed thing, but this is just kind of a simple thing. Now you can get something that Chapman encourages. I do too. An app to put on your phone. It's free. It's called Love Nudge, or the Love Nudge. And what it helps you to identify what your love language is and what your spouse's is. And ideally, the point is that you and your spouse both get the app, and then you figure out what your love language is. And it can be arranged so that it can give you a little hint during the day. Give you a little ding and says, hey, now would be a nice time to go put some chocolates under the pillow for your wife, or something like that, or put a sticker on the mirror in the bathroom that says I love you, or and there may be some other apps like this out there, but I've known people that have had a lot of benefit from this kind of thing. Another thing is John Gray, in his book Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. I think this is something we probably, maybe we don't know. A lot of people don't, but I'm speaking in generalities here, so you'll always find the exceptions. But one thing that he says in his book, men, we kind of think in this big thing that, if I give my wife a new car this year, I'm good. I don't have to really do much for the next 10 years, That's man think, So, and I've actually had this happen. We hear it as a joke, but it literally is. It comes from what some people have said, where some woman will say, well, honey, do you love me? And he says, I told you 35 years ago when we got married I loved you, and if anything changes, I'll let you know. Again, man think. Women tend to, and you girls can tell me I'm wrong if you want to. I know they're outliers. They're different. Everybody's different. Women tend to like things and more in the little things. They'd like the little chocolate under the pillow, or a note left in the refrigerator that says thinking about you, or the call during the day. Now I know some women that say, no, I'd never want my husband to call me during the day, but some would. I just a call, just say, hey, how you doing? I love you. Hang up the phone. Just smaller things there. So girls, am I hitting anything kind of close to truth here? Huh? Some of you are saying yeah. All right. So. But the main thing here is that there are differences, and learning whether it's your mate or whether it's somebody at work or just a friend, this will help. 5 languages of apology. Same thing as far as language. If you're trying to say I'm sorry, and I have Yurkovich's book right here, Milan and Kate Yurkovich, How We Love. If you're trying to apologize and say I'm sorry, have you ever done that and somebody doesn't accept it, says, I don't think you really are sorry? Sometimes it might be because there's a different language here for that. One is you can express regret. I'm sorry, and although it's best always to say what you're sorry for, you might, that's all it takes. That's me. I can get so angry at my wife or something. I'm like, I feel like I'm out of here. And he says, I'm sorry. And it's like, poof, it's gone. And I'm like, I'm glad I didn't say anything or do something, there. But it's just, for me, it's over. They said they're sorry, it's over. Not everybody is like that. She's not like that. Okay. The next one is accepting responsibility, saying what you're sorry for without blaming anybody else, but saying, I'm sorry I did or didn't do blah, blah, blah. You're not going to say, I'm sorry I did or didn't do blah, 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 but you also did da, 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 da. That doesn't work. You just stick to you. Say what you're sorry for. Now, this one, it's hard. I'm saying it's hard for me sometimes with that. Another one is making restitution. You say, I'm sorry, but you say, what can I do to make it right? I'm going to fix this, okay? And if if you are a making restitution person, and somebody comes and they just say, "I'm sorry," you're probably thinking, "Yeah, but you're just telling me that because you're trying to get me off of your back," is what you're doing. I don't accept that apology. But some people, they want to have restitution made, fix it in some way. Now, for the last two, genuinely repenting and requesting forgiveness, if you are one of these two, someone who is a 1, 2, or 3, on those first three, if they are that, it seems like they are groveling to them if they come and they genuinely repent. And this is where you're saying, "I'm really sorry. I really desire to change my behavior, and here's what I'm going to do. Oh, I'm sorry." So I'm kind of exaggerating a little bit here just to make the point. But if you're a genuinely repenting person, you're not hearing "I'm sorry" really. You're thinking if they do one of the others, yeah, they're just trying to get me off their back. But if you're one of these other three, it really seems like you're groveling there. So it's hard, I think, a little more. And then requesting forgiveness. "I'm sorry, please forgive me." "Oh, I'm sorry, please." You're really much more emphatic in this. So you might be saying that in all of these. There's a general rule, I would say, that if you don't know what somebody's language of apology is, do the shotgun until you find out. Do them all. Try them all there. And eventually, though, as your relationship develops, if it's a relationship that will develop, then maybe you can find more of who is what, anyway, in this. So a lot of people know the 5 love languages, but they don't realize that Chapman also wrote a book, The 5 Languages of Apology. Okay, so that kind of finishes on the relationship part, and I wanted to get into a little bit here to give you a bit of a model of how to handle a crisis, how to handle problem solving, if you will. You will find many models for this, and so I like to put it into 4 steps. Other people have, I was just reading today, Marsha Linehan has 7. They're all included in here, but she has them kind of broken down more. And perhaps you also have some other problem-solving techniques that you'll hear. But we want to keep these in order, because if we get these out of order, it tends to make more confusion. It can kind of screw things up. So the first thing we want to do is define and limit the problem. This is an information stage. Okay? We want to find out about it. I'm going to break this down a little bit more in a moment. Then we have the next stage. Once we have been able to define the problem, that's the feeling stage. That's the catharsis. That means to purge. That's where we want it. It doesn't have to be a dissertation. It just says, here's the problem, here's how I feel about it. I feel sad or mad or whatever about the problem. So we have this catharsis stage. Then we move from there into discovering possible solutions, exploring and describing alternatives, any possible solutions and choices. And there are a number of subparts to this that we'll look at. And then, of course, what we have to do is choose one and take action. Many great ideas and solutions have failed by not going into this last stage. So a great thought, wonderful solution, but if you don't do it, it doesn't work. It's kind of like I tell my clients all the time. I say, look, what we do in here, if you don't practice it, if you can do, it's kind of like going to the medical doctor and saying, I have a bad sore throat. He gives you some medicine. You take the medicine, put it in the medicine cabinet in the bathroom, but you never take it. It can sit there for a long time. It's not going to do you any good unless you take it and you use it. So it's the same thing with stuff we're talking about here as well. So defining and limiting the problem. This is, again, an information or an assessment stage. When you recognize that something's going on here that that we call a problem, or I like to call them an opportunity, we want to survey the situation, look around at it, try to find, who, when, where, what, what's the duration, what's the intensity, anything we can find out about what the problem is. It's very difficult to tease your emotions out of this. I recognize that, but we want to try to, as best we can, to tease out the emotion at this point and try to say, all right, the emotion might have been what let you know there is a problem, but we want to find out the ramifications here, the perimeters and parameters of this. We want to focus, bring the problem into focus, clarify the essential concepts involved, diagnose the causes if you can. But before you move to the next stage, you want to be able to, in a concise way, just doesn't have to be long, just a short sentence that summarizes, reflects, and responds to what the problem is. Now, if you do what all of us have done, and what you could do is you go right into feelings, or you go into, a litany of problems. And what happens is you get paralyzed. You can't move. You can't get out of it. You wonder where do I go from here? So when you define this, when you limit the problem here, we want to pick one. You might have a whole tree full of problems out here. Oftentimes it's best to pick the low-hanging fruit first. Not always, but what's the easiest thing you can work on? Pick one to work on. You may have, again, there may be a bunch of them out there, many of them out there. Pick one and work on that first. And when you finish that, work on another one. Now, I know problems don't always come as easy as I'm going to be talking up here. It's easy to give a textbook case of all of this. But really, if you'll try to limit this to one thing at a time, you'll find that there'll be less paralysis in this. So remember this. Then, once we can do this, we want to move into the next step, and that is the catharsis, the feeling stage. Again, it does not have to be a dissertation of a lot of stuff, but here we want to bleed the soul. You remember back in the old days, George Washington's day, they used to, when you got sick, they thought you had bad blood, so they'd lay you down, they'd slice you open, and they'd let you bleed out some of that bad blood, and then they'd stitch you back up. Probably killed more people than it helped, but but in this case, what we want to do is we want there to be the outpouring of the emotion here, so that you don't have to, if you're helping someone else and they tell you these emotions and they can be pretty raw, you're not there to judge that. They feel what they feel. Feelings are not a sin. Feelings are not right or wrong, good or bad. They are just feelings. What becomes good or bad, right or wrong, is what you do with the feelings. But here, what we want to do, we're just expressing it. We're just saying, this is how I feel about whatever it is. If you do not do this stage, the feelings can be overwhelming, and they can make it virtually impossible sometimes to go into the next stage, which is going to be finding solutions, because you're overwhelmed with the feelings. And that's why it is so important to get that information stage first. Let's talk about this a little bit. Let's see. And people, and by the way, I use this is one of the methodologies that I used. I was a suicide counselor for the Memphis, Tennessee Suicide Prevention and Crisis Intervention Center for when I was back in the States, going back and forth. I did that for about 6 years. And this was kind of a model I'd use with this. So if you use this, it doesn't make you a suicide counselor, but it may help you or somebody else not get that far. But so you want to bleed the soul. You want them to purge the feelings. You want to get the yuck out. Lance the heart wound, pop the infection, but accept the person's feelings. Now, you're not accepting sinful behavior, but you're accepting, okay, this is how you feel. I'm not going to condemn you for how you feel. Okay? I'm not going to tell you your feelings are wrong because you feel them. They're there. So let it out. Cry it out. In some cases, you might need to yell and stomp your foot or something like that. You do that. But you let that out, and it is like it washes your soul out. You ever done that? Anybody ever had a good cry or a good foot stomping or something like that, and you just feel better afterwards? You hadn't hurt anybody. Nobody's been hurt. You hadn't cussed anybody out. But you've been able to express whatever that feeling is that was in there. I don't know how many of you are squeamish, but I don't mean to be give an ugly example, but it's just such a good one. Let's say that you have an infection on your thumb, and your thumb is swollen. It turns red and green, and then it turns that kind of ashen gray color, and it's really full of pus, and it hurts bad. And you realize as you look at it, if I let this thing go, it could become septic. I could get blood poison. I could possibly die from it. Or I might have to cut my thumb off, or have somebody cut it off, amputate it. But before you do that, I've got to go to church. So you go to church, and what do? You're going to stick that thumb in your pocket. And you're going to walk around, and people are going to come up to you and say, "Hey, how you doing?" And you're going to keep your thumb in the pocket there. You're not going to shake hands because it would hurt maybe if you shook hands, and it doesn't look good. You don't want to look bad, do you? So you keep your hand in your pocket, and so now this hurt is affecting your social life and even your spiritual life at church, because other people don't see what you have inside. They don't see that infection on your thumb, or in the case I'm getting, in your heart, in your soul. I mean, I'm looking right out here. I don't know what's in your heart and soul. Some of you may be dealing with just tremendous pain of things going on in your life right now. And we look good with, smiling and all that, but you may have that infected heart, that infected soul. You're still a Christian, yes, but Christians hurt also. So it's affecting your social life, your spiritual life. So eventually you go home and you say, "Man, I've got to do something with this. I just have to do something with it." So you go get a needle and you put it in a flame, in a fire, or put it in the alcohol, whatever you do at your house. And then when you start going here like this, you notice that hand wants to do this. So that's resistance, and that's normal resistance. I know that sometimes people, they're coming for counseling, they forget appointments, or something else happens, or I had an accident, or sometimes, and I know when this happens, it could be truly what they're saying, but it also could be we're starting to get to the nitty-gritty here, and it really is painful, and our brains are hardwired to avoid pain and to seek pleasure. We won't ever get out of that. That's just the way God made us. And so, anyway, eventually you just say, "Well, I have to do it," and so you lance it. And when you do, what happens? Pus comes out. And you know what you have to do? You have to squeeze it, because you want to get the core out. You want to get it all out, because if you don't get it all out, what's going to happen? It's going to get reinfected. That's what happens when people terminate counseling before they're ready, really. They think, "Oh, I'm feeling better," because it'll feel better as soon as you start lancing that. But when you squeeze it to get all the pus out, it really hurts. But I don't know if you've ever done that. Probably all of us have done, most of us have done something like this. What happens as soon as you let go? You get it all out and you let go. It feels like you're on drugs. It feels so good. And so, you feel good, and that's when it can begin to heal, when you get it out. And so you get that out, and it can begin to heal. You might have a scar there. The scar might be only for a short time, could be for a long time, maybe forever, but it's better than having that infection there. A lot of times the scar will go away. So a lot of times counseling can be like that, and this stage right here, we want to ask feeling questions, not informational. We ask open-ended questions, not yes or no questions. If I say, "Bill, how do you feel sad today?" You can just say, "No." End of story there. But if they tell me about how you're feeling, what is it you're feeling? Oh, well, that's an open thing there to talk about. So you ask questions like, and this is whether you're asking them of yourself or of someone else that you're helping. You ask questions: how, what, who, when, where. And I say never, and I don't use the word never often, but never use why. Now, why do you say don't use why? Why can provoke guilt and shame. If you say, I feel sad, and I say, why do you feel that way? Then you feel like, oh, I better give Searcy a good reason here, yeah, and I'm not your judge. I'm not asking on that. But when I say what makes you feel this way, or how do you feel this way, that's less intimidating for you. I won't say you still may feel some degree of anxiety with that, but it's not going to be like, why? You better have a good reason. Here's just some examples of open-ended questions. I'll just go through these. I'll fly through these. You feel, because, meaning. Tell me more about thus and so. Earlier you mentioned this or that. Tell me how you feel about this. Can you tell me what happened that made you call or come by today? Or have you thought of doing, what have you thought of doing to change the situation? What's most important for you right now? How have things been going for you lately, and what would you like to change? These are just examples. There are thousands of open-ended questions. These are some I got from Howard Kleinbell. So the next stage after the catharsis stage is to move into discover, explore, describe alternatives, and any possible solutions and choices. And before we get in, as we get into this stage, we need to establish goals. Here's the problem, here's how I feel about it, now what do I want to see happen? And these goals need to be biblical, realistic, attainable, and desirable. If I say, well, my goal is I want to make $1 million this year, and so I'm going to establish a brothel, a prostitution house downtown Raleigh. Well, I could very easily say that's not even on the table here. It's not biblical. I'm not going there. I could say, well, I want to be the President of the United States in January. Well, that's really not an realistic goal for me, because I didn't get elected. Somebody else did, and so it's not attainable for me. I know if I put my name out there, they'd say, Bill who? And quite frankly, it's not desirable either. I don't want to be president. I'm glad somebody has to, but then we're going to list different alternatives. We're going to brainstorm. You throw anything, even crazy stuff, out on the table. But as you do that, then we're going to short list that. And we're going to ask questions like, what's best for God and the world? What's best for others and self? Will this solution accomplish the goal for which it's intended? Will these answers solve the problem? And so these are going to be some things that are going to help us with this. We short list these. I will, without going into that, get some paper. Let's say you have 3 possible solutions. You put solution 1 on one paper, solution 2 on another, solution 3 on the other. And then you look at the positives and the negatives for each one. Now, remember that some positives and some negatives are going to have much more weight than the others. I might say something like, I want to get my name in the newspaper for doing something that very few people do, and it would be exciting, and I would see some good, beautiful scenery. And I could say, well, flying in an airplane at 10,000 feet and jumping out with no parachute, well, I've listed 4 positives there. Definitely not many people do it. I'd get my name in the newspaper, the obituary, of course, but my name would be in the newspaper. It would be exciting, I'll guarantee you, and I'd probably see some very beautiful scenery on the way down. All right? 4 positives there, but I can think of one negative that kind of outweighs the others. Do you know what that one is? It's called death. So anyway, so we do want to weigh these out, and then we want to take action. And once you take action, after some time, review it. Did this work? You still have options. If it didn't, you can try it a little bit different, tweak it, try it again, or you could go to one of the other possible solutions. So we'll get to some of these other things at another time. So good being with you tonight. God bless you.